What if I told you that the most dangerous place for a woman isn't a dark alley at midnight, it's often a luxury honeymoon suite with silk sheets and champagne on ice? Tonight, I'm about to share a story that will make you question everything you think you know about fairy tale romance. Because sometimes, the prince in the castle is actually the monster. Have you ever met someone so charming in public that you couldn't fathom what they're like behind closed doors? Do you know a couple where everyone says they're so perfect together, but something just feels off? Has someone in your life ever seemed to have it all, the dream wedding, the perfect husband, the lifestyle everyone envies, only to discover that paradise was actually a prison? If you're nodding right now, this case is going to hit differently. Welcome back to Sinister Thoughts, where we explore the darkest corners of human nature to uncover the life lessons that could save lives. I'm your host, and today we're examining a case that shocked the international community and exposed the deadly truth about power, control, and the masks we wear in public. Before we get started, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button if you're ready to learn something that could protect you or someone you love. And if you're new here, subscribe and ring that notification bell because the stories we cover aren't just entertainment. They're education that could make the difference between life and death. Now, let me set the stage. We're talking about Sheikh Farid al-Mansouri and his bride Layla. On the surface, their story reads like a modern fairy tale. Think golden wedding ceremonies in Dubai, designer gowns worth more than most people's cars, and a honeymoon in a Caribbean paradise that most of us only see in travel magazines. But here's what the tabloids didn't tell you. Here's what the wedding photographers didn't capture. Here's what the resort staff whispered about long after the crime scene tape came down. This case isn't just about domestic violence. It's about how wealth and status can become the perfect camouflage for a predator. It's about how the very privileges that promise safety can become the tools of imprisonment. And most importantly, it's about the warning signs that everyone missed, signs that you need to recognize before it's too late. Tonight, we're examining a case where a fairy tale wedding became a nightmare murder scene in paradise, where a woman who seemed to have everything actually had nothing, not even the right to live. But the real question is this: could Layla have been saved if someone had recognized the signs? Could you recognize them in your own life or the life of someone you care about? By the end of the story, you're going to understand why the most dangerous relationships often look the most perfect from the outside. You're going to learn the specific warning signs that wealth and charm can hide. And you're going to walk away with knowledge that could literally save a life. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a masterclass in recognizing the predators who hide behind privilege, the abusers who weaponize luxury, and the deadly game of control that plays out in penthouses and private jets just as often as it does in trailer parks and back alleys. Are you ready to look behind the curtain of what seemed like the perfect marriage? Are you prepared to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters don't always lurk in dark corners? Sometimes they wear designer suits and own private islands? Then let's begin with the story of Sheikh Farid al-Mansouri, a man whose public image was everything and whose private reality was about to become everyone's worst nightmare. Sheikh Farid al-Mansouri wasn't just wealthy. He was Dubai royalty with a reputation that preceded him into every boardroom and social gathering. At 34, he commanded respect through a combination of inherited authority and carefully cultivated charm. His family's real estate empire stretched across 3 continents, and his personal portfolio included luxury hotels, private jets, and enough influence to make phone calls that changed government policies. But here's what made Farid truly dangerous: he was exceptionally good at being likable. Women found him magnetic. Men wanted to be his business partner. Social media influencers fought for invitations to his exclusive events. He spoke 4 languages fluently, collected rare art, and could discuss everything from international politics to vintage wine with equal expertise. When Farid walked into a room, conversations stopped not out of fear, but out of genuine fascination. The problem with charming sociopaths is that they're charming first, sociopaths second. Layla Hashim was 26 when she met Farid at a charity gala in Dubai. She wasn't looking for a husband, she was building her career as an interior designer, working with high-end clients who appreciated her eye for elegant simplicity. Layla had her own apartment, her own income, and her own dreams that didn't revolve around marriage to a wealthy man. But Farid didn't pursue her like other men had. He didn't flash his wealth or demand her attention. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about her work, remembered details from their conversations, and treated her like her opinions mattered. When he discovered she was passionate about sustainable design, he connected her with architects working on eco-friendly luxury projects. He made me feel seen, Layla would later tell her best friend Amara. Not like a trophy to be won, but like a person whose mind he actually respected. This is textbook predator behavior, by the way. The best manipulators don't start with control, they start with validation. Their courtship lasted 8 months, and from the outside, it looked like a perfect match. Farid would surprise her with handwritten notes, not expensive gifts. He'd ask about her family, her childhood, her fears and dreams. He listened when she spoke about wanting to design affordable housing for low-income families. He even offered to fund her passion project. But there were moments, brief flashes that Layla dismissed as stress or cultural differences when Farid's mask slipped. Like when she mentioned having lunch with a male colleague and Farid's smile tightened just slightly. Or when she wore a dress he hadn't seen before and he asked where she'd bought it with an intensity that didn't match the question. He just cares about me, she'd rationalize. He wants to be involved in my life. The proposal was everything Instagram dreams are made of. A private beach in the Maldives, a ring that cost more than most people's houses, and a photographer hidden in the palm trees to capture her genuine shock and tears. The photos went viral. Fashion magazines featured her engagement ring. Wedding planners called it the proposal of the decade. Their wedding was a 3-day celebration that cost more than many countries' annual budgets. 500 guests flew in from around the world. Layla wore 3 different designer gowns, each one more stunning than the last. The ceremony took place in a palace that had been rented exclusively for the occasion, with gardens that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Every detail was flawless. Every moment was documented. Every guest left talking about the obvious love between the bride and groom, but if you looked closely at the wedding photos, and I mean really looked, you'd notice something interesting. In nearly every image, Farid's hand is somewhere on Layla's body. Her shoulder, her waist, her arm. It looks romantic, possessive in a sweet way. But body language experts who later analyzed these photos noted something else. Layla's shoulders are tense in every single shot where he's touching her. Even on the happiest day of her life, her body was already trying to tell her something her mind wasn't ready to hear. The honeymoon was supposed to be their chance to finally be alone together, away from the scrutiny of Dubai's social elite and the pressure of living up to everyone's expectations of the perfect couple. Instead, it became Layla's death sentence. The 4 Seasons resort in Turks and Caicos was supposed to be their sanctuary. Private villas nestled between turquoise waters and pristine white sand, each one designed to give guests complete privacy and luxury beyond imagination. Their Villa Azaya, came with its own infinity pool, personal chef, and 24-hour butler service. The kind of place where celebrities go to disappear from the world. For Layla, it became a beautiful cage. The first red flag appeared before they'd even unpacked. As Layla admired the ocean view from their bedroom balcony, she pulled out her phone to capture the moment. Farid's hand closed over hers before she could take the photo. "No social media on our honeymoon," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "This time is just for us." It sounds romantic, doesn't it? A husband wanting to protect their intimate moments from the outside world. But here's what Layla didn't realize. He just cut her off from her primary way of staying connected to friends and family. By day 2, the pattern was emerging. Farid decided when they ate, where they went, what activities they'd enjoy. When Layla suggested they try the resort's couples massage, he insisted they needed alone time instead. When she wanted to explore the local markets, he reminded her that they had everything they needed right there in paradise. "Why would you want to leave when we have perfection here?" he'd ask, and the question felt loaded with disappointment in her judgment. The resort staff began to notice things. Maria, their villa attendant, would later tell investigators that she rarely saw Mrs. Al-Mansouri alone. When she did, Layla seemed nervous, constantly checking her phone and looking toward the villa entrance as if expecting someone to walk in. She was always perfectly polite, Maria recalled. But she jumped every time a door closed. That's not how people act on their honeymoon. James, the butler assigned to their villa, noticed that Farid did all the talking during service requests. He'd order for both of them, decide on their daily schedule, and answer questions directed at Layla before she had a chance to respond. "At first, I thought it was cultural," James explained. "But then I realized she was scared to speak up. She'd start to say something, then glance at him and change her mind." The turning point came on night 4. Layla had been trying to call her mother, a daily tradition that had continued throughout their relationship. But the call wouldn't go through. When she asked Farid about it, he casually mentioned that he'd arranged for their villa to have limited cell service. So we can truly disconnect, he explained. Isn't that what you wanted? Except Layla had never said she wanted to disconnect. She'd never agreed to complete isolation. And now, 4 days into their honeymoon, she realized she had no way to contact the outside world except through the resort's landline, a line that Farid monitored constantly. That night, she tried to use the villa's phone to call Amara, her best friend back in Dubai. Farid found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m. whispering into the receiver. The conversation that followed wasn't violent yet, but it was the first time Layla saw the man she'd married without his public mask. Who were you calling? His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made her skin crawl. Just Amara. I promised Ide. You promised me this time would be ours. Just ours. The way he said it made her realize that ours meant his. From that night forward, Farid's control became absolute. He confiscated her phone, claiming it was broken. He told the resort staff that his wife was feeling unwell and needed privacy. He arranged for all their meals to be delivered to their villa, eliminating any chance encounters with other guests. The few times Layla tried to assert herself, Farid's response was swift and calculated. He didn't yell or threaten, he simply made it clear that resistance would make things worse. I'm trying to give you the perfect honeymoon, he'd say, his tone suggesting she was being ungrateful. Why are you making this so difficult? By the end of their first week, Layla had stopped trying to call home. She'd stopped suggesting activities. She'd stopped doing anything except what Farid wanted when he wanted it. The resort staff whispered among themselves about the couple in Villa Azia. The beautiful woman who never smiled anymore. The charming man who never let her out of his sight. But none of them called the police, because technically nothing illegal was happening. A husband wanting privacy with his new wife isn't a crime. Even when control becomes complete domination, even when isolation becomes imprisonment, the wealthy can make it look like love. Here's what I want you to do right now. Drop a comment below about the warning signs you've recognized so far. Have you ever seen someone gradually lose their independence in a relationship? Because understanding these patterns could save someone's life. The Paradise honeymoon was about to become a crime scene. Tuesday, June 15th. Day 8 of what was supposed to be a 14-day honeymoon in Paradise. The evening started like all the others had since Farid tightened his grip on their daily routine. Room service dinner at exactly 7 p.m. Wine that he selected. Conversation topics that he controlled. Layla had learned to navigate these moments carefully, agreeing with his observations, laughing at his jokes, playing the role of the grateful wife. But that night, something was different. Maybe it was the phone call she'd overheard him taking in Arabic, a heated conversation about business deals back in Dubai. Maybe it was the way he'd been drinking more heavily than usual. Or maybe it was simply that 8 days of complete control had pushed him to a place where even the smallest perceived defiance felt like a declaration of war. The trigger was absurdly small. Layla had been picking at her dinner, lost in thought, when Farid noticed she hadn't touched the expensive wine he'd ordered. You're not drinking, he observed. I'm just not in the mood tonight, she replied quietly. In a healthy relationship, that would have been the end of it. But this wasn't a healthy relationship. This was a power structure where Farid's will was absolute and any deviation from his expectations was interpreted as rebellion. Not in the mood? His voice carried that dangerous edge she'd learned to recognize. I specifically chose this wine because I thought you'd enjoy it. I'm trying to make this evening special for you. I appreciate that, I really do. I'm just feeling a little tired. Tired of what? Tired of being treated like a queen? Tired of having everything you could possibly want? The accusation hung in the air between them. Layla could feel the familiar tightness in her chest, the way her body prepared for conflict even as her mind scrambled to find the right words to defuse the situation. That's not what I meant, she said carefully. I'm grateful for everything. You just what? Farid stood up from the table, his movements sharp and controlled. You just can't be satisfied with what you have? You just can't appreciate the life I've given you. This was the moment. The moment when Layla had to choose between her dignity and her safety. She'd been making that choice for 8 days, always choosing safety, always backing down. But something about the way he was looking at her, like she was property that had malfunctioned, finally broke through her fear. I didn't ask for this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't ask to be cut off from my family. I didn't ask to be watched every second of every day. I didn't ask to be treated like a prisoner. The words hung in the air like a confession. Like a challenge. Like the first honest thing either of them had said in over a week. Farid's reaction was immediate and terrifying. Not because he exploded, but because he went completely still. His face became a mask of cold fury, and when he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. A prisoner? You think you're a prisoner? He moved toward her slowly, deliberately. Layla's instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The villa was isolated. The staff had been dismissed for the evening, and she was trapped in paradise with a man who had just shown her exactly who he really was. I give you everything, he continued, his voice growing louder with each word. I give you luxury, security, status. I protect you from the world, and you call yourself a prisoner. Farid, please. You want to know what a prisoner feels like? What happened next lasted maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes that ended a life and destroyed 2 families and sent shockwaves through international headlines. Farid's hands, the same hands that had once held her so gently during their courtship, became weapons. The man who had whispered sweet promises in her ear became a stranger consumed by rage. The villa that had been their private sanctuary became a crime scene. The details of those 3 minutes are carved into police reports and forensic photographs. The overturned furniture, the shattered wine glasses, the way Layla's final breaths came in a room decorated with orchids and silk curtains. The violent collision between a man who demanded absolute control and a woman who had finally found the courage to say no. When it was over, Farid sat in the villa's living room for 47 minutes, staring at his hands. The resort's security cameras would later show him walking calmly to the front desk at 11:23 p.m. to report that his wife had had an accident. The desk clerk, a young woman named Sarah, noticed that his knuckles were scraped and there was blood on his shirt. When she asked if he needed medical attention, he simply said, "You should call the police." By midnight, Villa Azaa was swarming with local authorities, paramedics, and resort security. The scene they found was one of shocking brutality hidden behind walls of luxury and privilege. Layla Al-Mansouri, née Hashim, was pronounced dead at 12:47 a.m. She was 26 years old. She had been married for exactly 2 weeks. The honeymoon was over. The investigation was just beginning. Detective Inspector Marcus Thompson had been working homicide cases in Turks and Caicos for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for the political minefield that landed on his desk at 1:15 a.m. on June 16. The call came from his supervisor. "We've got a dead tourist at the Four Seasons. Husband's already confessed. Should be straightforward." Nothing about this case would be straightforward. When Thompson arrived at Villa Azaa, he immediately understood why his phone had been buzzing with calls from people whose names he recognized from international news headlines. The victim wasn't just any tourist. She was the wife of Dubai royalty, and her death was about to become a diplomatic crisis. The scene itself told a clear story. Forensic evidence painted a picture of escalating violence, overturned furniture, blood spatter patterns consistent with a prolonged assault, and defensive wounds on Layla's hands that showed she'd fought for her life. But the physical evidence was only part of the puzzle. "We've got a confession, DNA evidence, and witnesses who heard the altercation," Thompson explained to his team. In any normal case, this would be over by morning. But this wasn't a normal case. By sunrise, Thompson's investigation was crawling with complications he'd never encountered before. The first challenge came from the Dubai consulate. Within hours of Layla's death, diplomatic representatives arrived at the police station with lawyers, translators, and very specific demands about how their citizen should be treated. They didn't deny Farid's guilt. They simply wanted to ensure that cultural sensitivities would be respected throughout the legal process. Cultural sensitivities turned out to be code for "make this go away as quietly as possible." Meanwhile, Thompson's team was discovering evidence that this wasn't a crime of passion, it was the inevitable conclusion of a pattern of abuse that had been building for months. Layla's phone, which Farid had claimed was broken, was actually fully functional. The digital forensics team recovered text messages between Layla and her best friend back in Dubai. The messages revealed a woman who had been systematically isolated and controlled, someone who had been crying for help in coded language that her friend hadn't understood. "He decides what I wear to events now," one message read. "Says he wants me to look perfect for his reputation. He started checking my emails," read another. "Says he's worried about my safety, but it feels like he's worried about my freedom." The final message, sent just 2 days before her death, was the most chilling. "I tried to call Mom today, but the phone isn't working. Farid says it's the villa's connection, but I think he's lying. I'm scared." Thompson's investigation revealed that Farid had been monitoring Layla's communications for months. He'd installed tracking software on her devices, intercepted her emails, and even contacted her friends and family to limit their access to her. This was textbook coercive control. Dr. Rachel Martinez, a domestic violence expert called in to consult on the case, explained to Thompson's team. He didn't just kill her that night, he'd been killing her independence, her relationships, her sense of self for months. But proving systematic abuse in court would be challenging, especially when the defendant's family had resources that most small island nations couldn't compete with. The diplomatic pressure intensified when Farid's father, Sheikh Omar al-Mansouri, arrived with a legal team that included former prosecutors, international law experts, and crisis management specialists. They weren't there to prove Farid's innocence, they were there to minimize the consequences. Private meetings were held between Dubai representatives and local government officials. Conversations about economic partnerships, tourism revenue, and mutual cooperation suddenly became part of a murder investigation. "We're not trying to interfere with justice," the lead Dubai representative assured Thompson. "We simply want to ensure that this tragic incident doesn't damage the important relationship between our nations." Thompson found himself caught between his duty to pursue justice for Layla and pressure from his own superiors who were fielding calls from politicians worried about the economic implications of prosecuting a member of Dubai's royal family. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. The confession was on record. The pattern of abuse was documented. But the wheels of justice were slowing down under the weight of international politics and economic considerations. Local advocacy groups began organizing protests outside the courthouse. Social media campaigns demanding justice for Layla gained international attention. The case became a symbol of how wealth and diplomatic immunity could shield even the most obvious criminals from consequences. "This isn't about Dubai versus Turks and Caicos," Thompson told reporters. "This is about whether money and status can buy you a get-out-of-jail-free card for murder." The investigation had revealed the truth. Farid al-Mansouri was a calculated abuser who had murdered his wife in a fit of rage when she finally stood up to him. The question was whether that truth would be enough to overcome the political and economic forces working to protect him. Within 24 hours of Layla's death, the story had exploded across international headlines. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and dozens of other major networks picked up the case, each one framing it slightly differently but all asking the same fundamental question. How does a fairy tale marriage end in murder? The media coverage revealed uncomfortable truths about how society views domestic violence when it happens among the wealthy elite. Honeymoon horror, Dubai Sheikh kills bride in paradise, screamed tabloid headlines, treating the case like entertainment rather than tragedy. Fashion magazines ran retrospectives on Layla's wedding dress and engagement ring as if her style choices were somehow relevant to understanding her death. But more serious outlets began investigating patterns that went far beyond one tragic night in the Caribbean. The International Foundation for Women's Rights published a report showing that domestic violence rates among wealthy couples were significantly underreported, largely because victims had more resources to hide their abuse. And abusers had more resources to control the narrative. "Money doesn't eliminate domestic violence," explained Dr. Sarah Chin, who studied abuse patterns among high-net-worth individuals. "It just makes it more sophisticated. Instead of visible bruises, you get financial control, social isolation, and psychological manipulation." The report revealed disturbing statistics. Wealthy women were actually more likely to stay in abusive relationships longer than their lower-income counterparts. The reasons were complex but consistent: fear of losing their lifestyle, concern about custody battles over children, and the knowledge that their abusers had resources to make their lives miserable even after divorce. Social media became a battleground for public opinion. The hashtag Justice for Layla trended globally, with thousands of women sharing their own stories of recognizing abuse patterns in relationships that looked perfect from the outside. "My ex-husband never hit me," one viral post read. "But he controlled everything: my clothes, my friends, my phone calls. Everyone said I was lucky to have such a devoted husband. I almost believed them." The case sparked conversations in countries where domestic violence was still largely considered a private family matter. Women's rights organizations in the Middle East, despite facing their own political challenges, began organizing awareness campaigns about recognizing control and coercion in relationships. International law enforcement agencies started sharing information about similar cases. A pattern emerged. Wealthy abusers often escalated their control during major life transitions, engagements, marriages, pregnancies, or times when their victims were most isolated from support systems. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit identified common characteristics among high-profile domestic violence cases. The perpetrators were often charming in public, had reputations for generosity and community involvement, and used their social status to discredit victims who tried to speak out. The higher the profile, the more devastating the fall, explained retired FBI profiler Dr. Michael Rodriguez. These men often kill not just to silence their victims but to prevent the complete destruction of their public image. Layla's case became a textbook example of how wealth and privilege could amplify the deadliest aspects of domestic violence while simultaneously providing cover for the abuser. The bigger picture was becoming crystal clear. This wasn't just about one man's rage or one woman's tragedy. This was about a global pattern of violence that thrived in the shadows cast by money, status, and social respectability. Here's what Layla's tragic story teaches us about recognizing danger before it's too late. Warning sign number 1, the charm offensive. Predators like Farid don't start with violence, they start with excessive attention that feels like love. If someone is love-bombing you with constant contact, expensive gifts, and promises of a perfect future within weeks of meeting, that's not romance. That's a recruitment strategy. Warning sign number 2. Isolation disguised as protection. I just want to keep you safe. You don't need those friends, you have me. Why do you need to call your family so often? When someone starts cutting you off from your support system while making it sound like they're protecting you, they're actually trapping you. Warning sign number 3. Financial control. Even wealthy women can be financially abused. If your partner monitors your spending, controls your access to money, or makes you feel guilty for having your own resources, that's not generosity, that's control. Warning sign number 4. The public-private split. Pay attention to how someone treats you when no one is watching versus how they act in public. If their public persona is drastically different from their private behavior, trust your instincts about the private version. Warning sign number 5. Your body's warning system. Layla's shoulders were tense in every wedding photo. Your body often knows before your brain does. If you find yourself walking on eggshells, monitoring your words, or feeling anxious around your partner, listen to those physical signals. Now, if you recognize these patterns in your own life or someone you care about, here's what you need to know. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. This is available 24/7 and offers confidential support, safety planning, and resources. They can help you develop an exit strategy that protects your safety and financial security. How to help someone who might be trapped. Don't try to convince them to leave, that can actually increase their danger. Instead, stay connected, express your concerns without judgment, and help them maintain connections to the outside world. Most importantly, believe them when they tell you something is wrong. Document everything. If you're in a controlling relationship, document incidents, save threatening messages, and keep important documents in a safe place outside your home. Create a safety plan that includes where you'll go and who you'll contact. Here's something crucial: wealth doesn't make you safe from domestic violence. In fact, it can make you more vulnerable because abusers have more resources to control and manipulate. Don't let someone's status or reputation make you doubt your instincts. I want you to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with your daughters, your friends, your coworkers. The warning signs we've discussed tonight could save someone's life. Hit that share button and spread awareness about recognizing control patterns before they become deadly. Layla's story didn't have to end in tragedy. She left us warning signs, evidence, and a clear pattern that we can learn from. The best way to honor her memory is to use her story to protect others. If this video opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, subscribe to Sinister Thoughts and hit that notification bell. We're not just telling crime stories, we're providing education that could make the difference between life and death. Next week, we're exploring another case where wealth and privilege created the perfect cover for a killer. It's a story that will challenge everything you think you know about who can be trusted with power. Until then, stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and remember, your safety is worth more than Yoni's reputation.